Humanizing the Workplace. And we started this session a month ago, and this is a continuation of that conversation with the same panelists, and we are continuing to explore the concepts around humanizing workplaces. And leading this conversation as our moderator and host is Samantha Nadine Sales, as usual. Welcome, Samantha. I will hand over this program to you. You can go ahead from now. Take it out.
Thank you, Dr. Justin. Let me just share my screen before we begin.
And Madam Nosisa, good to see you. I recognize you there. Madam Nosisa, Dr. Nathan, I see Victor.
Hi, Doc. Long time.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you all.
I've got a problem with my video,
No
but it's the same me. Nothing has changed.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Tsitsi, welcome as well, and everyone else. Over to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Dr. Justin. Always good to see familiar faces. Thank you very much. So good day, everyone, and welcome to the 5th session in the Reframing Corporate Perspective series. My name is Samantha Nadine Abuda-Sales, and I will be serving as your host once again for today. In this OLDN TV consultative session, we will continue to elaborate on the topic of humanizing the workplace. And to discuss the topic, we are again privileged to be rejoined by the 3 renowned panel members we had in the first session. The first is, of course, Ms. Regina Huba. Ms. Regina is the founder and CEO of Transform Your Performance. She is also a multicultural and multilingual transformational leadership coach. Ms. Regina is the author of multiple works, such as the book Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, which is, of course, available on Amazon for all of you, as well as a leadership-focused white paper, her signature framework, Powerful Leadership Transformation, or PLT, and the Humanizing the Workplace approach. You may stay updated on her work and events on either www.transformyourperformance.com or www.followregina.com. Our second panelist for today is Mr. Patrick Chotier. Mr. Patrick is the founder and director of the Institute of Emergent Organizational Development and Emergent Change. He is currently in his 41st year of private practice as an applied practitioner in the fundamentals of OD and emergent OD, focusing specifically on culture and co-creating human-centered, healthy, and performance-based organizations. Mr. Patrick calls himself an in-the-trenches practitioner, as he has learned a lot of what really works directly from his clients, and he is honored to be a part of an associative collaborative partnership with the Center of Organization and Leadership Development, or COLD, with, of course, Dr. Justin and Dr. Do Toon. To complete our panel for today, we have Dr. Christine Firi Mushibwe. Dr. Christine is the current Vice Chancellor of UNICAF University in Zambia. Dr. Christine is a passionate educationist and an experienced HR professional and consultant. She has been awarded accolades such as Africa's Most Influential Women in Business and Government, as well as GARA's Award of Excellence for Global Leaders. She is also a proud member of the Organization Leadership and Development Network, or OLDN. Before starting with our planned discussion points, I'd like to give our panelists a chance to briefly greet our viewers and participants. Ms. Regina?
Yes. Can everybody mute themselves, please? Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone watching. I'm excited to see some familiar faces in the participants list here. Among them is also New Boy. Good morning, good afternoon to you rather. And thank you so much for the warm introduction, Samantha. Always great to see all of you. I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Ms. Regina. Mr. Patrick?
It's an honor to be here as always. I want to learn from everyone. I want, like, whoever wants to speak their mind, their truth, they'll learn from that also. We all have experiences, we all have something to share. So let's just get in some good conversations.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. And of course, Dr. Christine.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be around here. And like Patrick has indicated, these webinars are actually a learning curve, and you don't go out with the knowledge that you had. You go out with more knowledge accumulated as a result of the conversations that are going on. So it's always a pleasure to be around here. And it's so nice to have you, Samantha. You are a brilliant presenter. So thank you so much.
So glad to see you, always glad to see you. And of course, our other panelists. I'd also like to take this moment to remind the audience once again to like the OLDN TV and COLD page if you have not already. Share this video and all our other posts, and please feel free to comment any of your questions. Similar to previous consultative sessions, we always encourage your participation, and we will try our best to address as many questions from the audience as possible, either in between discussion points or at the end of the session during the Q&A portion. Now, to give a brief recap of what we discussed in the first session, there were discussions about the definition of humanizing the workplace, and the panelists were able to share their overall approach and their suggested approach in humanizing the workplace. Of course, the concept of distinctive uniqueness was elaborated on by Ms. Regina, and a few cornerstone principles when humanizing or attempting to humanize the workplace was shared by Mr. Patrick. There was also some discussions about how all of this can tie into organizational attributes. There were also some sharing of knowledge about the influence of technology when trying to make a workplace more human. And of course, we also focused on the significance of co-creation and openness, as well as a brief touch on the deconstruction of hierarchies. Now, if you would like to see the first session in its entirety, please feel free to visit the OLDN TV. Now, after keeping these concepts in mind, let's start off with our new set of topics for today. So to start off, what is the importance of flexibility and commitment in humanizing the workplace? Ms. Regina, please start us off.
Yes, thank you, Samantha. Well, I want to start with flexible work schedules here. And I know flexibility means a lot of different things, right? So, for example, flexible work schedules, in my opinion, are great because they are more results oriented. Of course, they don't work in just any setting. Like, for example, the staff of a store or of a bank is supposed to be present at the shop or at the branch of the bank during a particular schedule that aligns with the specified opening hours. So customers know when they can expect to be served, and they don't go there in vain. We want to know in which schedule there are people who can attend to our needs, obvious, right? And there are several different examples for that, of course, but this is not required in all workplaces. For example, we have project-related jobs that don't need to be tied to a specific schedule. What matters more here are deadlines and results, and an expected outcome once the task is finished. And this is more of an entrepreneurial mindset. Yes, what counts is the outcome and not the hours worked so much. Or maybe you can still, measure the hours so that everybody gets compensated in the same way, but they don't have to happen at the same time necessarily. So what is required really is for any type of flexibility is a mindset shift on all sides. For the team leader or manager or whatever that person's title is, we've talked about titles in the past, right? The required mindset and attitude is that of laying out clear expectations rather than micromanaging every single employee. They don't have to be the authority so much anymore that dictates the rules. They are more like, okay, I'm the one who really lays out what's expected, and then you do your job, and then we follow up, right? In the beginning, clear expectations may still need to include very detailed instructions, but once the process works, detailed instructions are no longer necessary. This process also involves the opportunity for the team leader to move from a more authoritative role to more of a coach role, in my opinion. And on the part of the employee, on the other hand, the mindset needs to be one of self-responsibility. Self-responsible employees focus on results and outcomes and how their work fits into the bigger picture of the team's work. They don't make just time at work to get paid. They are productive Yes, they are productive. They really want to do the work they want to do. And if an employee takes 5 hours rather than 8 hours for the same task, all the better, right? Rather than exchanging time for money, it becomes a setting where people exchange value for money, where they exchange performance for money, results for money. And again, as in all of this, trust is the basis for this to function smoothly. We've talked about trust so much, right? So we can't just jump from one extreme to the other, of course. If we have a very rigid system right now, we can't go to complete flexibility in one step. We got to build trust and a trust-based environment first and provide guidance and gradually shift to a more flexible system, one step at a time. And it has to be really well communicated. Communication is always key. Any change needs to be communicated properly. And, many are grateful also for the opportunity to work remotely at this time. They didn't expect it last year, but also others want to go back to their workplace. And I think most people would like to have a combination of both, like a hybrid, right? Where they can work remotely part of the time so that they can also sometimes have some flexibility to take care of their families when needed and to just organize themselves. For example, 2 days a week. That has worked very well in many, many work environments. Or maybe they need a month off when they have a caretaking responsibility that's coming up. We just heard of one earlier when we were talking in private here still before we went live. So this is where working remotely is in fact humanizing, because we respect these humans' needs and desires. But of course, flexibility isn't just about remote work. It's not just about flexible work hours. It's also about other things. And, I'm looking back at my time at BCG Munich when I worked at the Boston Consulting Group in Munich. I was still supposed to do a certain number of hours at the time because I hadn't moved into my management job yet. So I was still expected to do 40 hours a week, but not in a fixed schedule. We had to organize among ourselves. So when I wasn't there, for example, my colleague would take my calls and would take over. And, this was an extremely high-paced environment. So it really had to function. Every single second had to function, and still it worked. And we didn't have laptops at the time that we could take home, nor cell phones. So just imagine, this can work. It's doable. Now, what also counts is that employees are properly recognized and rewarded for their work, and that includes adequate monetary compensation, benefits, etc. That certainly helped BCG, my employer, to get more out of their employees than many other places that I know. And I think that's also really, it all plays together into the flexibility, really. I hope this makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Ms. Regina. Before moving on to Mr. Patrick, I'd just like to remind the audience to please keep your mics muted so that we have optimum clarity from our panelists. Mr. Patrick.
I just want to support Regina about what she said. You got very into the detail of it, and that paints a very concrete picture, and I think that's very needed. So thank you, Regina. I took a little different view of it insofar as, and it's all interrelated, flexibility and human capabilities. People are multidimensional in their capabilities, and the workplace uses very narrow aspect of those capabilities, because employees are put in boxes. So are leadership and so are management. We're all in boxes in the hierarchy. And that really, if you ask people what they do outside of work, you'd be amazed at the capabilities they have, how much responsibility they take. They raise families, they coach, they're involved in community aspects. So there's many capabilities that organizations do not attend to. And that dehumanizes people because we're in boxes. We become taskmasters, and we're seen as taskmasters. We're seen as human capital, human resources to be used and shoved aside as needed. that just dehumanizes. We're put into roles and labels, labels of status, position, hierarchies. I don't know, to me, it just dehumanizes people. The other side of the coin that I focused on was organizational design. How does an organizational design manifest more capabilities and responsibilities? And what we have right now was built in, what, 1890? And we're stuck there. So how does that manifest the spirit of people, the humanness of people, relationships, open communication? So what we're really dealing with every day in organizations are closed systems. And that closes off the humanity of people, the interrelationships. How do we develop open systems and organizations and open forums so we can bring out and explore and talk about what we can do outside the organization, bring those capabilities into the organization and become people again? That's what really humanizes organizations to me. And that leads towards self-organization, greater responsibility, and that leads towards self-agency, that we realize again in our lives that we can influence things, that we can have a voice in things. That makes us human, that we're listened to, that we can co-create. And this is like unlimited. What we've created in our organizations is a very limited space for people to be people. Open systems create an infinity of space to explore. And that's natural to humans. So it brings out our natural capabilities, not just our technical skills, of which we're usually bounded by and we're labeled by. So that takes courage, though. It takes courage of the people that run organizations, but then we have to look at those people and make them human too. So they start exploring. They start going into the unknown. And that's very natural for people. We do that when we go on vacation. We do that in our own crafts. We do that in many other areas. So it's that naturalism to me that makes people human. And we have to open up those systems. The other thing about being responsible is people really need to experience success. And when we're taskmasters in boxes, we don't really experience success because we're not connected to the big picture. We don't know how we contribute to the big picture. We're there to do work, 9 to 5, give us a paycheck. Well, who wants to spend 30 years doing that? So let's open the doors up. So I have a whole lot of things to say, but that's enough time for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Dr. Christine, what do you think about?
I think that's very interesting, actually, from what Regina and Patrick has actually been able to raise here. It's interesting because it almost looks like we sat down together and put notes together, because one of the things that I came up with was that there would be these 3 pillars which would be important for me. That is the issue of trust, the issue of self-responsibility, and the issue of accountability. And the way I looked at them, I thought that relationships within that particular organizations would be like the glue that bonds these together and enhances them. And at the end of it all, you've also got the issues to do with communication, decision making, and finally then you have got this human work environment. So flexible work environments really, not necessarily looking at the schedules like Regina has indicated, but if you've got a flexible work environment, then you are creating a workplace where humans are working as humans. Because I've been to organizations where employees can be very flexible. Flexible in the sense that if they're asked to do anything outside the box of their roles, they'll do it. They can be asked to go where they are not even supposed to go, they'll do it because of issues to do with accountability, issues to do with trusting the employers. But when the employee now comes and says, my child is ill, then the employer himself becomes inflexible. And I think when you are talking about a flexible work environment that sort of like fosters humanity, I think it is where we understand that we've got values, human values. And like it was said last time, that these same human values if you look at the uneducated people, they are far much better than the educated people, because the educated people are about what they have learned, what they want to keep in the box, and that is how they want to control the people. That's how they want to command the people that are working with them. So I think, like the others have been able to indicate, it's issues to do with trust, issues to do with self-responsibility, issues to do with accountability. And there must be relationships there where the leader himself of the team is not isolated and outside the box, but wanting these others to remain in that particular box and made to do things as they are told. I think we are supposed to be flexible in the way we relate to each other, in the way we work, because when we do that, then we are creating an open system. And it's very true. These are issues to do with mindsets. You know, if our mindsets are so rigid and we are not ready to change, then this cannot actually be possible. And in most cases, what we are doing, what we think is the right thing is so good, it's so comfortable. But when we are bringing in these new concepts, people begin to look at themselves and feel, wow, this cannot work. You know, when you have an open system, people are not going to do their work. But that's why we are looking at issues to do with trust. That's why we are looking at issues to do with self-responsibility and issues to do with accountability and relationships. If we are going to create these flexible work environments, even the schedules themselves, flexible work schedules will work very well where there is a flexible work environment. Thank you.
Excellent, Christine. If I could just add on, what are the things that inhibit those to be manifested? Like, those are great pictures, and I think everybody would want that. But what have we created that actually inhibits that we're not aware of? And like you say, it makes us feel safe, and there's less risk to go into the unknown. But what really inhibits that shift of mindset or the form that we're working in? When I use form, it's just not structure. There's many things in a form. So how do you bring out that awareness that we're actually inhibiting what we really want to create? Now, I'm not asking for a question, but it's always a good question to ask senior management.
Now, speaking of senior management, thank you, Mr. Patrick. I do agree with Dr. Christine, by the way. I feel like your answers are so complimentary. It does sound like you sat down before the meeting and you took notes and you told each other, yeah, we're going to go with trust, we're going to go with self-responsibility and accountability. But in the scenarios that you've—
Don't give away our secrets.
No, I would not dare, Mr. Patrick. But in the scenarios that you've commonly painted, it's the senior management that are more inflexible rather than, you know, the employee themselves. I'm trying to overstep the word subordinate because I know we're against that word, but rather than the employee. So let me ask you this: what pressures are the management under that supersede humanizing the workplace, and what are the weight of these pressures? Dr. Christine, let's continue on with you.
Well, that's very, very interesting. I also go through these pressures. As a leader, I am told, no, we are seeing disorganization here. No, we are not seeing leadership, we are not seeing, because as far as they are concerned, they want to see this tight way of working. I am a people person, so I stand in the corridors and talk to those people that help us clean the environment and all that. And then someone comes and says, I think these guys who are cleaning are putting so much pressure on you. Why do you have to stand along the corridor and speak to them? No, but the fact is that they are human beings, So the pressure that is there is these roles that we have defined ourselves, these boxes that we have put ourselves in. And in the process, because we've put ourselves in these boxes that define, that's the vice chancellor. The vice chancellor, please, when she's passing, you need to move out of the way. These boxes that we've put ourselves in, we want to maintain that. And because of that, there's a lot of rigidity. And because of that, there is no humanity in them, because we remove humanity and begin to act in that particular role. And because we are acting, that puts a lot of pressure, because we want to maintain that a leader is supposed to look serious. A leader is not supposed to laugh anyhow with people around them, and all that. So the pressures that I'm looking at are these structured responsibilities that we are given that we do not want to work outside of, because we want to make sure that, because I'm forever, so you are forever reading your roles. What am I supposed to be doing? You tick that. What am I supposed to be doing? You tick that. From my work experience for over 30 years, I've realized that those don't even work at all. Even when I go back and begin to look at, have I done most of those things? They are very inflexible and they don't make you actually function as you want to. It's about being human. It's about understanding the environment. It's about knowing what the vision is. It's about these live visions and values that we create within that same environment. You know, this is very, very important, because if we overemphasize these roles, then we are creating pressure on ourselves. And the weight is so much, because even when you have an appraisal, I had an appraisal recently, and when I sat down with the CEO to go through the appraisal, he couldn't go through with it with me, because he ended up saying, wow, let's discuss outside the appraisal. Because I'm sure he must have realized that he may not have managed to go through what I had actually put up there. And it would have demanded, because of the inflexibility, a high wage as well, because I've managed to do this, I've managed to do this, I've managed to do ABCD. One of my team members keeps on telling me that even if the wage is not okay, if I'm well motivated, the culture here is good, and the values are good, I'll still wake up in the morning and come to work. You know, so I think the pressures are self-created and organizational created, because that is how I'm not saying they are bad, but to an extent, they end up making us so rigid, and we are under pressure to ensure that we have ticked the box, we've ticked this, and then in the process, we become rigid and not inflexible.
Thank you, Dr. Christine. I believe that Mr. Patrick is nodding his head in agreement. Mr. Patrick, would you like to share what's on your mind?
Just to add to what Christine's saying on another aspect, and that is, and you're right, Christine, there's a tipping point of pressure. Some pressure is great for motivation. It makes people think out of the box. They make it more creative. But there's a tipping point. Each individual has a different tipping point. What I want to focus on in most organizations, especially for profit and nonprofits, is a laser focus on bottom line results, and it's driven by numbers. So management and leadership and other people are driven by expectations of time and results, but mostly numbers. I'll tell you what really pressures management's quarterly reports, because that's tied to their career, that's tied to their finances, that's tied to their rewards and bonuses. I talked to a lot of, every organization I came into, ever worked with in those 40 years, this is a big deal. There's pressures, different values from the board and expectations from the board that what can be really done in reality. There's pressures from stakeholders, there's pressure from shareholders, there's pressure from community. A lot of times they don't have the resources, they don't have the money, they don't have the manpower, they don't the woman power, they don't have the abilities, they don't have the decision-making capabilities. They are in a box and they're just like everybody else. We talk about management employees. Well, they're all people. I think we need to get away from management employees. They're just people and we got things to do. So they're boxed in by what they can do, but we think of them as almost semi-gods, that they can do anything. And so we create our expectations and we blame them. Well, who's staying around saying, how can we help our managers be successful? How can we help our leadership be successful? We have this top-down mindset that they're going to do it for us. And then we create this parent-child kind of thing, dynamic in organizations. And the child has expectations. I'm sure a lot of you have been parents. And child have expectations outside of the reality of what a parent can do. So that's a whole nother dynamic that is created by this form that we call an organization. And yes, it is self-imposed. And no, it doesn't need to be there. So that's what I have to say, just to add to what Christine has mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. And if you allow me, I really do think, I'd just like to share that I do think that there is some sort of permutation when the leadership starts putting themselves in these roles and in these boxes. There was a professor of mine that shared a story wherein he was waiting to get his water from a drinking fountain in the university, which was common. We have them all over the place. And as he was lining up, but then when the cleaner that was about to get water for himself saw him behind, all of a sudden the cleaner stepped out of the line. And he's like, "Sir, go ahead." And the professor was so flabbergasted because he's like, "Why are you stepping out of line? We're in the same line." And he's like, "No, because you're a professor." And he was trying to explain to all of us that is the importance of building a good culture in your organization. He was a management professor of mine, one of my favorites. He was saying this is exactly why we don't put ourselves in boxes, because if professors acted like that, all of a sudden, these lower class employees, I don't want to say it, you just
Lower
said that we
class,
shouldn't, yes, yeah, you just said that we shouldn't, but I'm not sure how to address it. But all of a sudden, all of these other employees put themselves in boxes as well. And then it's a domino effect. Then all of you are in roles. So I completely agree that it's self-created. And at the same time, when you self-create, you permutate. So it's very, very important. So just
Excellent point.
Thank you, Mr.
Excellent
Patrick.
point.
So to follow up with you, Mr. Patrick, I'd like to hear an explanation of the relationship of the values gap that you've recently mentioned and humanizing the workplace. Mr. Patrick, please.
Okay, I brought this up last time in my experience that when I'm sitting around with senior management or supervisors of that lineage in a hierarchy, and having dinner with them, because you create a relationship over time. You go to dinner, you play golf, do whatever, and that's where the real stuff comes out. And they start talking about what they do outside of work in the community and all of that. And I go, "Well, tell me about your personal values." And they start, and they really get into them because they're very proud of them, because they're proud of their integrity and their honesty and their connections outside of work. And I asked them, "Well, when you walk through those doors and you put on that corporate hat, let's get into reality." "Oh, marketing doesn't tell the truth. We can't tell really the truth to our customers. We can't tell the truth to our shareholders. We have this corporate line we have to keep in line with policy and regulations." And just exploring with them, what does that do to you? It creates conflict in us, creates stress. We can't sleep because either consciously or unconsciously, we have conflict inside ourselves, from our personal values to our corporate, what we call values. I don't call them values. And I can't mention what I call them. So all of these things that we're driving up, there's a values gap personally. And that can be in a group also, because they sit around and talk about each other, what they're doing on the weekend. It's quite different of how they act and all that. This conflict creates a stress. This stress, when it hits a tipping point, impacts their decision-making, okay? And it's called, this is from old information processing research way back in the 60s. What does stress do to information processing, to filtering our information, to our decision-making? What it does is moves towards concrete decision-making and concrete thinking under stress. And I'm sure we've all experienced that under great stress, especially continuous stress. We get more concrete in our thinking. We're not into really making good thinking, good decisions. Like when we get angry, we say things. We make bad decisions. It's a closed mindset, okay? Closed thinking. So we get together and we start creating continuity between personal values and organizational values, okay? Which changes a whole lot of things, moving into an open system. So that consistency and congruency starts developing strategic relational thinking and network thinking. It's an open process, an emergent process of thinking. So we get more comfortable with change. We get more comfortable with the unknown. We start exploring again. Just by creating some congruency between personal and institutional values, and magic happens. So that they start manifesting different things. They give people different experiences in the organization. They interrelate differently. And that just has a ripple effect within the organization. So we're in the age of chaos and complexity and rapid change. I think there's people called Vulcan or something like that. So when we are stressed and we have a closed mindset, we make decisions based on our traditional experiences rather than exploring new experiences and open thinking and exploratory thinking of new decisions and creating novel things. And so that's what's needed in the age of volcanism, or whatever it's called, the age of chaos, complexity, and rapid change. We need to open our minds and shift our minds. So just that one congruency between personal values and corporate values has a really magical display of what can be done based on our thinking, our decision making, and giving new experiences within the organization. Simple as that.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Now, like you said, we are in an era of rapid change and in turn, an era of chaos. So I'm sure all of our viewers would like to hear of a few examples. So could I ask you to discuss a few case studies or examples which prove that humanizing the workplace is indeed effective in organizations? Dr. Christine, could we start with you, please?
I lived in England for some time, and I remember that the first time that I got there, I walked into a church. I was looking for a church and got into this church, and somebody came and asked what my name was, and I said, I'm Christine. And this little boy, I think he must have been about 8 years old, repeated and said, oh, Christine, and went and got the mother by the hand and said, Mom, this is Christine. I felt really offended. And I was thinking, I'm odd. I can't be called by my first name by this little boy, you know that. But as time went on, I realized that your name is what was very, very important, not the title that you had, not probably Mrs. or Mr. And all that. And that began to impact me very much, because when I came back to Zambia, the first place where I worked, the vice chancellor said, called me by, and now I was a doctor. When I went out of Zambia, I was not a doctor. Then I came back and you were expecting everybody else to call you doctor. But then the vice chancellor just called, oh, Christine. And we went on the first name basis. I couldn't call him by his first name, but he called me Christine. And I began to appreciate that. And it helped so much, because by him calling me Christine, it sort of like drew me to be able to walk into his office and discuss things clearly. I moved away from that university and went to another university, and the vice chancellor also there kept on calling me Christine. And I know that a number of people there kept on saying, she's not a student. She's not a student here. She's in charge of this department. But he kept on calling, and up to now, I have this relationship with him because of the first name title that we actually allow each other. And then I again moved from that university and moved to this other university where the vice chancellor was a white man from South Africa. And because of South Africa being what it was, he walked into my office and said, I'm coming from a country where racism is quite high. And if I call you by the first name, will it feel like I'm bringing you down? I don't want that to be experienced. And I told him, no, we can actually operate on the first name basis. And that worked very well. And I think he's been one of the best leaders that I've ever worked under. And I learned a lot of things as a result of that kind of a relationship. And for me, these are some of the case studies. And because of where I have come from, that has really, really helped me. I know when I was in England, I worked with one person who used to be my supervisor, my lecturer as well as supervisor when I was doing my master's. But when I started doing my PhD, I started working for the university, and we started traveling together to China because we had universities in China where we used to work from. And we got so close and began calling each other Christine, Lynn, Christine, Lynn. And that relationship has brought us so close together that even now we've ended up starting an NGO together. She's my friend. My PhD supervisor has ended up joining the NGO. She's my friend. And you know, that kind of relationship that has been created, I think it cannot be broken. Because if it was professor, and some of these are professors. If it was professor and I was approaching them as professor, I know one professor who I didn't like, because every time I did a presentation, he wanted to know whether I had read the latest book in the area. And I used to say, it's like he sits at a computer in a publishing company and reads every book that is published that particular night. And I called him professor, and up to now, I have no relationship with him. You see, so there is something. Yes, I know there's culture, and we come from different cultures, but like Patrick has said, I think there are two things that are standing here. You've got the personal values and the organization values. And the personal values, you are looking at what is it that I'm expecting best in this organization. And when we bring that there, not where we are looking just to be the ones that are up there or to achieve or to be known, but it is what is my contribution. So there's the personal values that should not be at complete loggerhead with the organizational values, but there's a way in which they're able to meet, because when stress comes in, like he has indicated, then it creates a lot of problems. It's a tipping point, and it just can create so many problems within that environment. But from my point of view and case studies that I can actually give, every place where I have been to, the vice chancellors that I've worked under, they call me by my first name, and as a result, they are my friends. I still work at UNILAS because of the relationship that I had with the Vice Chancellor. I still supervise students at Zambia Open University because of that particular relationship. I still communicate with my previous Vice Chancellor, who is in South Africa now, because of the relationship that I had. And his wife has become a very close friend to me, to a point where she even used to say, he's going to be your husband at work, and he's going to be my husband when he gets back from work. But it's because of that kind of rapport that we created that made working with him very, very well.
Thank you, Dr. Christine.
That's a powerful story, Christine.
I'm sure you also have a lot of case studies that in mind, Mr. Patrick, but could you share a few with us now?
Well, I want to talk about my oldest client of 25 years, and these things don't happen overnight. They don't happen in a 3-day little event thing, which is not OD. They don't happen. It takes years of development. It never stops. And so traditionally, this ACO Power, they build $500 million power plants to $1 billion power plants. They build them in England, they build them in the United States, Canada, Australia, around the world. They wanted to move from a top-down hierarchical control and control culture, command and control culture, because they're all engineers. That's how they were taught to think. Very linear thinking, stepwise thinking, 1 and 1 or 2. And that's normal for them. But the new senior management wanted to move it towards a team-based self-organizing culture, of which decision-making is pushed down, accountability is pushed down, take away judgment. Let's develop our people the right way. Let's not judge them. Let's not put them in a box. Put the budget down, give them a budget. They can tell us what to do because we hire good people. Why shouldn't they tell us what to do? Start the movement upwards, create sort of a communication there, a relationship with people. But further down the organization, the hierarchy, so they can order their materials, they can do the hiring, don't need HR, well, for some things. Get your own resources, you're adults, that's why we hired you. And align the organization, strategy, objectives, implementation of that. So the strategic plan isn't only at the top, each department takes that and they align it to their department, use their words, so they own it and they implement it in their way. Management had to move and leadership had to move away from command and control to manifesting that self-agency, which I'm big on. They had to become facilitators, mentors. They had to get guidance. They didn't give control and you do this and you do that. They gave guidance so people could learn. They also used situational leadership. Sometimes they had to, direct, depending on the situation. They gained, sometimes they coached, sometimes it was full participation, and sometimes they went to effective delegation. But they always want to move towards 100% effective delegation. where most managers move to abdication, two different things. So it took a long while. They're still working on it, but they understand that organization development is a long-term thing. It's not a short-term, let's get together and have nice lunches. So let me give you a story about one person. His name was Old Bill. He was about 65 years old at the time, and he built these plants and he commissioned them, and he had a lot of power. So basically management leadership bent to him. He used to throw chairs at people. He used to swear at people, but he got the job done. So basically he was of value. But in this new culture they want to develop, he didn't have any part of it. He didn't understand it. He wasn't there. So, of course, I was asked to get to know him, and we created some relationship, and I bent over his chair after a couple of months, and I looked him in the eye, and I asked one simple question: Bill, where do you get satisfaction when you're not working? You know, he said, I love to work in my garden. I love to put the seeds in, the nurturing, the water, see it grow. You know where I'm going to. And, you know, I said, tell me about that satisfaction. He says, I just love that. He lived out in the prairies and, you know, grew up sort of that way. So I said, okay, why don't you look at these plants as your garden? Plant the seeds, nourish them, give them fertilizer, give them water, watch them grow, watch them produce tomatoes, watch them produce cucumbers. And his whole mind shifted right there in a minute. He went out and started talking differently in what he envisioned for his plant, this one big plant, the biggest plant. People were falling off their chairs. Couldn't believe the change in behavior and the experiences they had, the new relationships that they built with this guy. So it can happen in a moment. Sometimes it happens long term. So there's a story about an individual as well as an international power group.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Now going briefly to Ms. Regina. Hi, ma'am. You already shared about a case study of yours, which is BCG, in the first question, I believe. Now I'm going to ask, ma'am, how important is proper connections between people in the workplace?
Yeah, so I want to specifically talk here about the benefits of co-creation rather than competition, because this is what really, for me, is very, very closely related to building connections in the workplace, right? Because we don't have to be close friends with our colleagues, but we still need to work well with them and have a good time at work at the same time, right? Be productive and have a great time. So earlier this week, I posted on LinkedIn the following: competition is working against each other, wasting precious energy. Co-creation is working together to create something bigger and accomplish more, right? So again, competition is working against each other. Co-creation is working together. That's how I see it, at least. And I believe that co-creation is far more fruitful than competition. And yet we've been educated so much into competition because it served the system. At least that's what people thought, right? Maybe it doesn't serve the system so much, actually, but maybe it does. So how much energy and time is wasted on competition and the conflicts that arise from it? I know this from my work with my clients and also from the work I have seen when I was in a management position years ago at BCG, right? So how much energy is expended on the illusion that there is not enough? That's the underlying illusion. And that I have to compete with you because you might be better, when in reality, you're just differently great, differently brilliant. So I talk a lot about this in the context of distinctive uniqueness in our previous session, right? This is part of my work. So, but what I want to focus on here is that we're wasting all this precious energy that could be used much more productively if we just allowed our employees to bring out their best selves, to show us their most creative side, to show us more of their unique potential, which then could be used for the benefit of the team, for productivity, for creativity, innovation, team bonding, cohesion, all the good stuff we want to see. Yeah, because humans are not production machines. Somebody said that earlier in a similar way, right? Humans are not production machines. They are humans, and we need to offer them workplaces that are humane. And job descriptions need to be more flexible in that sense too. We can adapt job descriptions. They don't have to be set in stone. Yes, we need certain requirements for certain jobs that are, that are indispensable, but there are others that can be adapted, right? And that's also a part of the responsibility of a, manager, leader, whatever our future preferred term for that is. And of course, we all know that there's a difference between manager and leader. In my work, I put a lot of emphasis on energy, to come back to the previous thought, and to this energy that's expended unnecessarily on competition. And there's a very good reason for that. If team leaders and all employees really were more aware of their energy, if they learned how to manage their energy, this could reduce their stress and therefore conflict, burnout, sickness even. And it would improve their wellness, their job satisfaction, their business and meeting presence. All of that, their visibility in their organization. So it would be beneficial also to their own careers, the way they are perceived by others. So if people just were trained to tap into their inner power, their inner power energy, their this mindset that I am enough. And if then they wouldn't feel that need to exert power over others. We could have more functional, flatter organizations. There'd really be no need for positional authority with the right mindset and with the right energy management. Instead, companies focus on training in time management. When time cannot even be managed anyway, that's ridiculous in my point of view. So I really have to laugh about this, because there is no such thing as time management. You cannot manage time. You can manage your resources within a certain time. You can manage your priorities, your activities, but you cannot manage time. Time just is. So again, your resources, many things, right? We talk about human resources, but we want to move away from that actually, because we want to see the human being. But if we talk about resources, energy is one of those resources, but certainly not time. Time just doesn't care if you manage it or not. So why do we put so much focus on it? Why do we not talk about how we can manage our energy, how we can upgrade our energy? But anyway, that's a different conversation. It's a huge conversation for another time, maybe. But again, I believe that time management is an alienation tool, actually, and it takes us away from the human. What we really want to focus on is to create more co-creation, that we need workplaces that are humane, workplaces where we can build relationships, create connections, be understood and accepted and welcome. And, when we talk about tools that can accomplish that, story sharing, I think, is one of the really important tools. And Patrick mentioned a little bit of that earlier in his case study. When people share their stories or their interests, that can make a huge difference. So story sharing, I call it story sharing, by the way, on purpose, and not storytelling, because when we say storytelling, we're just telling a story and maybe nobody else is a part of it. When we share our story, we make a connection, right? And stories have a lot of benefits. They connect. They reduce the risk of stereotyping as we get to know the person. They increase cultural sensitivity and awareness. They can dispel myths and therefore also diminish suspicion and increase trust and mutual understanding. And they can bond the team together as this mutual understanding increases. We can also inspire and encourage others through our stories, and especially also as leaders. Plus, we can learn more about an individual, and this can also help us adapt their job description so they can make a more substantial contribution that's aligned with their talents and skills, their specific distinctive uniqueness, and also with their career aspirations. So in short, story sharing pulls people out of their boxes and into their humanness. And that's why I love it so much. So many people think that story sharing is a waste of time. I believe it can save you a lot of time in conflict and, you know, greater productivity that comes from it. And in the past, when I interviewed diversity and inclusion leaders here in the US and also in the UK for my white paper, one of them said, I would take all the leaders and put them on a desert island so we can know each other really well through stories on a personal level. I think that's when trust really gets built. And I put that quote into that white paper because I thought that was so true. Now, I also wanted to just quickly mention some other co-creation related case studies, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but Judith Glaser, who is who created the conversational intelligence modality that, I'm sorry. That was my phone. I forgot to switch it off today. I apologize. So Judith Glaser, who created the conversational intelligence modality, said, describes a number of case studies in her book about conversational intelligence. And for example, where she tells us about international teams that had huge preconceptions and prejudices against each other, and that came together when they started sharing their stories, when they really started working together more closely. And, you know, co-creation is a huge part of conversational intelligence. She also tells us about a British, very traditional fashion brand with very rigid structures that turned around not just the culture of their company, but the entire bottom line. And they actually, turning around that culture saved this company. So there's so much richness in this concept of co-creation, which also impacts the bottom line.
Thank you, Mr. Gina. Oh, yes, please, Mr. Patrick, sorry.
I think Penelope had a question.
Yes, I was about to say, yeah,
I'm
it's a
sorry.
comment, I believe, Mr. Patrick.
So
let's just read it out.
I have,
Yes,
should I add?
sorry. Yes, please. My
Both
apologies.
Christina and Regina have mentioned relationships, and I think I want to get something straight here. Relationships is everything.
Mhm.
Relationships is the ways and means that create the result of culture. Now, the cliche these days is culture is everything. We have to realize it's the relationships that build the culture. The culture is the result of that trust. Christina's mentioned, Regina mentioned those relationships. That's the outcome. So I think a lot of people have it backwards. Create the relationships, the culture will form. New experiences will form. That's the result. Just a simple thought.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. Now, before we move on in line with the story sharing, there is a story from Miss Penelope. So she typed, I also have a story. My supervisor has no relationship with some of us in the unit because we don't gossip with other employees at work. She sits in our office to gossip, and during that time, she doesn't want us to be in the same office. Hence, work is not moving. I am even stressed up, especially where most of the time I am the one doing all the work while my coworkers sit with the director and gossip. That's story.
Yes. Sorry, Samantha. If you can
Yes,
allow Penelope to share with their voice, I think if she blesses us with their voice and share that story, it will be more powerful. Penelope, if you can do that. We can come back to her. I think
Maybe in
it's
the
better if she
Q&A
share
section.
about, yeah. Okay.
Yes, doctor, thank you.
Do we have time for a question, Samantha?
She's there. She's there. Penelope is there.
Oh,
Yeah,
she's
we're
back.
not-
Okay.
Sorry.
Hello.
Hello, Miss Penelope. It's just a little choppy. Let's
Hello.
try again. Yes, clearer now. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'm so humbled. Thank you to all the speakers for the day. You know, the issue you brought today is so wonderful. It has actually helped me. I even feel much better now. The story that I typed earlier, you know, we have a boss who is, first of all, very rigid. You know, she wants that maximum, you know, respect, where even when you meet her in the corridor, when you greet her, sometimes she doesn't even respond back. She just keeps quiet, like she remains mute. She'll just give you that facial expression. And sometimes we wonder why. Is she upset or what? Now the worst thing is where she comes to sit with, you know, my co-workers in my office, and I have no one to run to because I tried to go to with them what was happening in my unit. But you know, the situation got worse because the HR person also told that director, like, name, say she's the one who came to complain that you disturb their office, you go to sit and have tea with your juniors. And so the situation got worse to an extent where, you know, I'm there seated during work hours, and then the senior most person would even say, I hate this girl. And all my friends would contribute by saying, yes, even us, we hate her. The best thing, I think she should resign and go elsewhere. So this really has been the most, you know, worst situation ever. And I even discussed this matter with my family members because I thought of maybe I should just resign before even I can find somewhere else to go, because the situation is really worse. It's like every day I'm among the people that are gossiped. It's an everyday thing. So really, I felt good when you brought out this issue of really having a humanized, you know, workplace. That's all I had.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Ms. Penelope. Any comments from our panelists?
Dr. Christine was saying something. You're muted, Doc.
Yeah. I wanted to say it's a very sad situation that you are in there. And since you are attending this webinar, I think you are learning something, and it's something that you can take wherever you are going to go, because changing mindsets is not something that can be done in a day or two. It is something that is learned, and it can take a long time, and a willingness to be able to change. But if there's no willingness, then it becomes so difficult. I've heard a lot of stereotype comments from men where they say, if there are a lot of women accept a lot of gossip, and I don't agree to that. And I know some women have even said, no, it's in our blood to gossip. It's not in the blood of women to gossip. So it's not a good thing, because again, like you have indicated, it takes work away. And then there's the issue of stress, which Patrick explained very, very well there, because then it makes the whole place toxic. And the best thing probably is the decision that you have made to move out and save yourself and do right if you ever come into a position of leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Christine. Talking about stereotype briefly, let's just go through one question from Mr. or Miss, I'm not sure, Okukalu Okuwagwu. He asks, why has it become near impossible for some leaders to give listening ears to their followers? Is it about rigidity or stereotype? Comments from our panel?
Both. I think that gentleman or woman has learned that in their life, and it's been rewarded some way, and it's been reinforced in some way, and it's created some degree of status or something that they hang on to. And so I think that's a learned thing. So that's how it happens.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Ms. Elizabeth, if you would allow me to just finish two more questions, and then we'll be opening up the floor for a Q&A. I'm so sorry, I'll remember to come back to you just because we're in line with it right now. So just like you said, there is an importance with how the management or the leaders of an organization reacts to humanizing the workplace. So could I just ask if you could elaborate on the significance of humanizing the leadership specifically? Mr. Patrick?
Yeah. That's a really good question and something I've experienced a lot of. The question is, how can employees also humanize leadership? Then the leadership humanities or the organization. Yeah, and working with staff, it's all about how can you connect with the leader? I think I mentioned this before. We expect leadership to be semi-gods rather than people. We expect certain excellence from leaders. Well, they're people too. So one of the things you have to start looking at them as people, change your mindset. That leader is a person, and identify with that as a person through yourself. What frailties do I have? What unknowns do I have? We're all people. We have those common things. And then start interacting with that person a little differently, and maybe they'll interact differently with you. Ask them questions about, what can I do to support you? How can I make you successful? Turn the tide, turn the hierarchy upside down. A lot of leaders go into shock. Or ask them for guidance. Be open, be humble. Ask them some questions that you don't know that you want answers to, or at least maybe not ask them for answers, but can I explore this with you? What do you think? Create open-ended questions and rapport questions. Give them kudos, give them reinforcement. When they do something good, give them some good things. Again, they're people too. Make them human in one's own mind. How we see things is what we create. If we see things differently, those things will change differently because we're interacting with them differently. That's what I've learned to make a difference in humanizing leadership. It's a connection. It's building a new relationship. A lot of people wait for that as leadership's responsibility. And I say, no. They're human like you. Take some responsibility to build that relationship. See what you can do. That's my answer.
Thank
Pretty
you, Mr.
simple,
Patrick.
actually.
Ms. Regina, any additional notes?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about a little bit about, so hiring in general, right? Who do we hire as leaders and who do we hire as employees that are not in leadership positions? Yes. So I think in both cases, it's really important to not just make it about technical skills. Somebody earlier mentioned listening skills, such an important skill for a leader. It is also a co-creational skill. It's a conversational skill. It's one of the most important things that a leader can show us. And listening skills is also part of interpersonal skills. So what type of leaders do we want to hire? As we all know, there are different personality types. Some people are more people-oriented, some are more task-oriented. Yeah, there are lots of personality tests where we can find out about ourselves. And these are actually not to put people into boxes, but they are a self-discovery tool. Yeah, they are. I just have here, for example, I want to show you this because I have where is my book now? I have a big book here, which is about human design. I must have placed it somewhere else. Let me get it real quick. And I want to show you this particular example. Can you see it? Sorry. Because this has given me so many insights into myself and who I am. There are 4 main types, but it doesn't mean I'm in a specific box. It's just really a self-discovery tool because I think every leader needs to start with self-leadership. And we can use these tests to also make hiring decisions for specific positions, depending on what the main emphasis should be in those positions, right? So there's nothing wrong with any of the personality types we have. We are all different for a reason. We've talked about this now repeatedly, but we want to hire leaders with a certain maybe personality, or whatever you want to call it. Personality is often not even the right word, but with a certain attitude as well for a specific position. And the same we want to do for any employee. Yes, we want to see some very general values that are reflected in them, that are also aligned with our organizational values and the team values and all of that. So we want to look at those values as we choose our candidates, because we also want to actually make sure that we avoid too much friction, right? But it's good to have different types of people in a team. And to hire people with different perspectives. That's in fact very enriching and can benefit products and innovation, as we know. So attitude is really key to me in all positions. Anyone can learn new technical skills, even leadership skills, but inspiring someone to upgrade their attitude is far more challenging. Yes. So for me, interpersonal skills are critical in all these, whatever we want to call it, in positions, levels. I don't talk about levels much, but some people do. And we oftentimes call these interpersonal skills soft skills. And by calling them soft skills, we are diminishing their importance. Because these are really the skills that are most challenging for many people.
Yeah.
For example, a growth mindset. All of that. Team spirit.
Thank you, Ms. Regina. I hear some agreement from Dr. Christine. So let's go into our last question before we go into the open session. There has been a lot of participation and opinions about the way that we address each other. So let me ask, is the way individuals address each other a way of humanizing the workplace? Let's just clarify this topic. Dr. Christine?
Yeah. It's actually a thorny issue, and probably for us here in Africa, it is coupled with cultural traditions, which have been inherent in us, and some of them we've learned along the way, and like we have been learning, it's a culture that sort of like is developed, and it is changed because of the the people around us that we meet, and all that. So if I give an example of myself, probably from a domestic point of view, my father was my best friend, very, very close, to a point where even my mother knew that she could not separate me from my dad. I was the only girl for a number of years until the last born came, and it was female. But that relationship that I had with my father, it was a glue that kept us together so much. Unfortunately, I lost that relationship at one time with my father, because my mother kept on saying, "You are of age now, and you are not supposed to continue sitting down with your father. You need a wrapper around, because you don't need to expose your legs to your father. You don't need to laugh very loudly in the presence of your father. And you can't eat in the presence of your father." And in the process, because now I wanted to ensure, my mother was trying to make me this traditional woman that is keeping the culture, and this culture, this is who we really are. And so in the process, there became a distance between me and my father. And it is something that pained me so much, but it had to be maintained. So I got married. And when I got married and began having my own children, as much as possible, we talked with my husband, these traditions, we need to give them up. We can't keep keeping them. And so my daughters, I've got 3 daughters and only 1 son. My son is my best friend. The girls, their father is their best friend. And so one day my mother visited, and my daughter was sitting on my husband's lap. She was 8 years old, of age. She had already matured. And my husband was reading a book. My mother got me outside and said, "You can't allow her to sit on the father's lap." And I said, "What is wrong with that? That's the father. That's the relationship that they have." I was not going to allow my daughter to go through what I went through as well. So you see, these are cultural things. And I understand, yes, from where we're coming from, hierarchies are very, very important. People want to be called by titles. Like we said last time, if you don't call me by my preferred title, then there's something wrong in the organization. But again, like Patrick has said, there is also a part that employees contribute to dehumanizing the leader. Immediately the leader comes, the employees, because again of their inherent culture, they stand up and begin to say, the leader is here, the boss is here. Even the term boss is still in existence. And I'm sure some of us have used it here because we feel this is the boss. But if you look at the history of who a boss is, it's not a good thing. I've seen it in banks where a white man arrives here in Zambia and the teller calls him to come in front. And I've kept on saying, no, 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 no. If he's in a hurry, I'm equally in a hurry. He's not a boss. So these are things that we have inherited. And probably for those that were colonized, there was also that has also contributed, because then there was an expectation to recognize those that were superior. And this we have kept it on, so much that we now want these titles. And now there's a third thing that is happening. I go into certain meetings and I hear of somebody who is engineer, pastor, doctor, professor, really? Or if that person was an ambassador at one time, maybe even 10 years ago, that title of ambassador has remained. It is like it was earned simply because he went outside the country as an ambassador. And as a result, you find that even the way you begin to treat them, we distance ourselves from them because we want these titles. And these titles are now separating us and dehumanizing us. And yes, it's true. In certain cultures, people will be expected to be called with a bar. Like in Zambia, there's a BA to recognize that this one is elder. So you call them Ba Christian, Ba what, That's the culture. And like we have indicated, it's important to know that culture is not established as an establishment of an empirical research. It is the people, the lived experiences there. Like Patrick has said, there's relationships that we create there, that we develop there, or in the long run develop a culture. So what are we, developing within our culture? If what we within our organization, if titles are what we are wanting, let's look at what these titles are doing to our relationships, because the relationships might not be there, because then these titles tend to sort of like put a gap, a barrier between those that have got low titles and those that have got high titles. But this is not to tell people to stop calling the doctors, for you, Regina, to stop calling Regina mom, but what kind of a culture are we developing as code as well? Because again, these are lived experiences. Because of our experience here, what are we going to come up with? But if you go back and then you begin to tell your leader and say, no more, I will not call you ambassador, engineer, pastor, what, all those titles. It's really up to you. But what we are trying to say here is, we are trying to encourage you to say, we can humanize a workplace because we are humans. Regina said something that is very, very powerful. Human beings are not production machines. They are humans. Let's create relationships that enable work to take place, where there's flexibility, where there's accountability, where there is trust, where there are open systems, and work will take place because of issues to do with accountability. But I'm sure those that are coming from such organizations, you will know what normally happens. So let's just be very careful and know what we take out of this meeting. We don't want your organizations to be destroyed because we are talking about this, but it's about what are you really learning, what is emerging and resonating in you as you listen to what we are saying here.
Thank you, Dr. Christine. Very well said. I see Mr. Patrick clapping. Before I go to you, sir, I'd just like to say that I completely agree with Dr. Christine that it is embedded in the culture, but I'd like to go back to what Mr. Patrick said earlier, where he said that change doesn't really happen overnight. So it's evident in me that I still use titles, and it's in my culture, just the same way that it is in Africa, Dr. Christine. We grew up having a specific title even in the domestic household, where somebody older than me would be called ate for a female and kuya. And now when I see toddlers without calling them these titles, if I see a 10-year-old call me Samantha straight, it would be very disrespectful, and his mom would probably come from the other room and just smack him or something, or pinch him very, very slightly. So maybe it is a lived culture for us right now, and maybe it will change, but over time. Mr. Patrick, I see that you're about to give us some words of wisdom. Please do.
Well, no, I have no wisdom to share. I'm learning here. I just want, hopefully Justin will give me permission to share this. It's to me, it's funny. It may be a shock to other people. So since I've joined Cole, I've gotten these pre-words like Mr. and blah, 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 blah. And I've been saying, just call me Patrick, please. But you know, that, I guess the conditioning is always been like you're saying, Samantha, it's hard to let go. So finally I said, okay, I have a master's in industrial organization, Dr. Justin, and I'll call you Dr. Justin, and you call me Master Patrick. Oh, can you see that? Yeah, we're going around, yeah, say we're going around Africa and just Dr. Justin's called me Master Patrick. What kind of a communication would that be? Well, I thought it was funny, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think I got the point across a bit.
Thanks for sharing. Now I can address you as Patrick freely. you see, I have improved in my last emails. I have just
yes, and I've congratulated you on that. So thank you about that.
Thank you.
And the second point I want to bring, it all comes down to the proverb that has stuck in me since Justin has shared this, I think the first or second time he spoke. I am because you are. And everything comes down to that. And if people really understand what's underneath and the depth of that short little proverb that you all know, it has many, many significant meanings of what we're talking about right now, the stereotypes, the objectification, the assumptions we put on things, the traditional learnings that we have, our institutionalizations, our schooling, all of that stuff can be cut right through that I am because you are. Simple as that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. We have now come to the end of our planned discussion points. So I encourage everybody to please send in their questions or their comments, and I will read it out for you if you would like, or you can raise your hand and we can have you say your comment or question to the panelists directly. I believe Miss Elizabeth, Dr. Elizabeth rather, sorry, had her hand up, but she is no longer with us. So maybe when she comes back, can I ask Dr. Nathan if he is here to give us a few comments to open up the floor for the Q&A section? Dr. Nathan, could we hear you?
Hi, Samantha.
Hi,
Sorry,
Dr.
technology
Nathan, nice
always.
to hear you.
Yeah, I was listening and listening and listening, and I was almost like jumping. Said, "Oh, that's a point. That's a point. That's a point." So I've written quite a number of points here, and I'm sorry, I still have a challenge with my video. So I think you just hear the voice there. Yeah, I followed the discussion as very, very wonderful. Like I always say, if we can be having such discussions almost every time, and then I think it's going to help us very much. Something that I think I've learned very much is this idea of referring to I'm a doctor, I'm a professor, I'm a what. I think these are just titles there. I appreciate all the experiences. I think, excuse me, personal experience that has been brought on board today. Those are very wonderful, especially when it comes to culture. Of course, we cannot run away from that culture. It's very important, but there are things that will make us, go 500 years ago if we are not very careful. So those points that came out, I appreciate very much, and I'm sure everyone has really benefited very much. I had some questions that I wanted to answer, but fortunately enough, during the discussion, I was just marking saying, did they see my questions on my paper? Because all of them have been answered. And I appreciate that very much. I think I nearly said Mr. Patrick, I'll say Patrick. I appreciate that because I think Justin there has also mentioned that he has now changed when he's writing his emails, is now saying Patrick, and Regina there. Of course, I'm trying to see if I can say Christine. I'll try by all means, but like we said, there's that culture, but it's something that we should try by all means to run away from, as long as it doesn't interfere with our running of our business, our families and other things. I think, thank you very much, Samantha, for that. It's a very wonderful and well presented. Thank you very much to the presenters as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nathan. So I'm going through the comments, and there are a handful of comments from Dr. or Miss Nosisa. So one of them says, consider a compassionate approach to her as she has an apparent unmet need, which she has not identified or defined to herself. So to impact on others positively, there is a degree of self-knowledge that is necessary, which will assist her to practice openness and transparency about herself as a person and not a second-guessed shadow of herself. Madame Nosisa, would you like to unmute your mic for a few seconds and share your thoughts?
Thank you very much, colleagues.
Hello, Madame Nosisa, nice to see you again. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I just thought as I heard the painful story of Penelope. Where am I now? This is just disappeared. I'm so sorry about that. Yes, much as that environment is destructive, almost. Making a person hate to wake up every morning and go to work. But there's something that says to me, somebody is needier than all the others around them, and I definitely do not want to diminish, the scientific thinking behind how a person like that can be assisted. But I have found, in my own life, that the minute I start praying about things, they find a way of resolving themselves. You will be amazed how one day, one morning, that person will be saying to the people, I wish you could sit down too, because I don't hear you speak. And in the meantime, that is Holy Spirit. And whatever your version, fellow members of Holy Spirit is, that is already working itself on her, So I think that it's something to think about, and I know it's slightly different from what we've been discussing today. But I think we are also sharing in the spirit of Regina what we know and what we know works. I also just want to quickly mention, because I was late to take part in the introduction, if I may, Samantha.
Yes, please.
That from the month of August, I was appointed as a lecturer at Da Vinci Institute here in South Africa.
Congratulations.
And I teach business management to become students for various clients it used to be called Warwick University. I am quite certain that we all know that name, but they've now become an institute, and so I have a steep learning curve right there. It's all online, so I don't have anybody who will gossip. In fact, everybody wants to get closer to one another because everything is online and people don't meet and can't irritate one another like that. So people are actually getting closer to one another. Samantha, I hope that I managed to cover the initial point, but I did not want to lose this opportunity to share with you what has since happened in my professional life. Thank you.
Congratulations again, ma'am. Thank you for your contribution and your participation. Let's move on to Ms. Jane. Jerry? Oh, yes.
Samantha,
Yes,
may I
please.
just add something to what our dear friend Nosisa just said? I wanted to add to that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So it is really that we're all connected. It's also in that spirit of Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. It means so many things. So we are really all spiritually connected, but also connected through our energy. And we are not disconnected from each other as, you know, as we seem to be, because when we only look at the material world. And in fact, we communicate energetically at all times, whether we notice that or not. So why not do it more consciously, you know, like you suggested, right? We can do it at a distance, remotely. We can do it when we interact with people in person, over the phone, virtually, or just like just now. So our energy is always getting exchanged, whether we are aware of that or not. So why not do it more consciously? And why that's also why I think this energy aspect is so important. Thank you for that. I really appreciate your sharing.
Thank you.
I'd like to also respond to Nosisa. If I say that right, if I say that wrong, I apologize. You brought up something very powerful. How we react to another person is my responsibility. I can react with fear, anger, etc. Or I can shift that and I can understand pain or what their added person's journey brought them to. And maybe I can interact with them differently. Do I bring them closer or do I push them away? My feelings are my responsibility. They didn't do it to me. I create my own. So just an added point to that situation there.
Thank you.
And you could even use a tool for that, if I may just add that I learned in another coaching modality. So I don't always practice the entire coaching modality, but what was really helpful was that image of imagining that person of when they were a child. You know, can you connect with that child of that person and then get that connection back in that way? So they learned so many things along the way that might not always have been nice, that might not always have been pleasant. They might have gone through a lot of pain along the way from being a little child to becoming an adult. And I think when we just put ourselves into those images or into those shoes without making assumptions, okay? I'm not saying, oh, this might have happened or that might, just really keeping an open mind and saying, okay, maybe, you know, this person went through a lot of challenges like we all do, right? So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There is a response to Mr. Patrick from Miss Penelope. So she said, true, Patrick, I have developed anger, bitterness, fear. I think that's bitterness, fear, and anxiety all in one. So let's move on to Miss Jane for now. Ma'am, you have a question or a comment? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Samantha. It's Jane. You can just call me Jane in the spirit of today's topic. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking all the panelists. It has been a powerful day. It's not a question that I have, it's just a comment or rather a story sharing. So in the company that I work in, I've been with them for the past 5 years. And the day I got my first interview, when I was told I was hired, I was told that one thing, never call the owner of the company madam or anything, any name that is going to be like giving her a position. Just call her by her first name. And for me at first, it became weird, as Christine has said, in Africa, we are told to give titles. So with time, I came to understand like, okay, when I call her by her name, I am able to communicate with her better because it's like I'm talking to somebody else, somebody who's like my peer. And then the next thing I was told, I think Patrick has mentioned, I am because of who you are. And I was told on that day, this is the statement they use in the company, if you want anything done, do it yourself. So this has been pushing me all along, and it has pushed everybody in the company. Instead of waiting for somebody else to do something, it has become like a culture where we are all responsible. We all become responsible of everything. And then the third thing that the company after COVID came up with is the story sharing. So every Monday we get a weekly meeting, all the staffs in the company, and the meeting is all about giving our experiences outside work. So we tend to talk about our personal lives. We tend to discuss, we tend to say, oh, this week I went to this place. It was amazing. I will recommend this. So we tend to have these story sharing moments. And maybe if somebody has an issue, we kind of tend to discuss it. So it becomes like a community, a culture that you're building. And so far it has done wonders for us. So once more, thank you all for today's session. I normally don't get the time because of the work schedules, but today I'm really, really privileged to be here. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you, Miss Jane. I'm sorry, Jane. It's against my nature just to say the first name. So let's just revisit two questions from the previous Q&A open session we had. So it's from Mr. Ivan Steenkamp, and he asked, when considering the concept of humanizing the workplace, how do we deal with nepotism and favoritism when we do recruitment? So, Mr. Patrick, I'm sure you have thoughts on this.
How much do I have, Samantha, or Miss Samantha? How much time do I have? Because I have a whole page here to answer.
I'm sure.
How much time are you going to give me?
We have around 20 minutes left, Mr. Patrick, so around 5 minutes, because I have another question waiting for you.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, I'll make this short and sweet. Yes, dealing with nepotism and favoritism. The objective here is to neutralize that nepotism and favoritism. So to do that, in my experience and working with my clients, is create a fair playing field. Okay, and that is to create a process that everybody goes through, a point system based on a balanced scorecard to align and co-create. First, I work with that department or where that recruitment is going to go to. I work with the department so they're clear on their own business goals and objectives, and work with that department and the department team to align themselves to the corporate goals and objectives and be very clear of what competencies and relationship interaction skills that they need within that team. It's called chemistry. So I help them develop quantitative and qualitative dimensions and attributes, both functional and interpersonal and personal skills, aligned to the business objectives, the organizational purpose, the values, and the cultural attributes. So there has to be an alignment there. HR creates a short list around the technical skills usually, but then move to the next level that will really make a difference in relationships and performance. What are their personal values dealing with? And so they're aligned to the cultural alignment and dealing with change, team chemistry, problem-solving abilities, co-creating skills, et cetera, et cetera. So there's these, it's been called in, Regina mentioned these other skills, these qualitative skills that people need, and that really makes a difference. However, I take it to another level. It's the department and the team that identifies, that works with, say, the top 4. They do the hiring. They make the choice, not HR. They have, and what I found in doing that is the team develops an ownership in that person to help that person be successful and to experience success. So it's taken out of HR hands, that final thing, and the team makes that choice. They do the questions because they want to understand, can this person work with us? Or they have the same way of doing things that we do it? And that ownership is very important to that person to experience success. So the department and the team play a major role in the hiring process. And it all comes down to everybody goes through the same process, create a fair playing field based on point systems of a balanced scorecard, both qualitative and quantitative, rather than the leader picks who he likes or she likes. And that sort of neutralizes the nepotism and the favoritism. A fair playing field.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Yes, you're right. It was short and sweet and clear.
Well, I don't know about clear, but I would like other comments on that. What do you think of that? Is that possible? Is that done in organizations that you are involved in? Or is it arm's length from the department? Or is it best story wins, or the person with the status and the power chooses? Or is it HR too involved? HR is a supportive process, not the decision makers. So I'd like to hear if we have time.
Yes, we do.
Anybody
Dr.
else have
Christine or Ms.
opinions
Regina?
on this?
Yes, we can close in about 10 minutes. I think we have stayed for almost 2 hours. I understand Regina has another meeting coming shortly as well. Okay.
If there are no contributions, Mr. Patrick, if you would allow me, although I'm not an employee of the organization, but my family is rooted in the HR department. 2 out of the 5 major females, I don't want to specify who in my family, they've graduated with a degree in psychology and they work in the HR. And I do know that they do try with balanced scorecards. You're correct, Mr. Patrick. They do try with balanced scorecards to have a qualitative and a quantitative bracket in terms of what KPIs they want to hit in terms of specifying their candidates. The only problem is, as much as they would try to neutralize it, like you said, how we would want it, we want to neutralize every single candidate to be seen in more of the factors rather than how you're perceived in terms of favoritism and nepotism. The problem is it could be a goal, but it's not always gone through successfully.
Right.
So it's a good initiative. It's just that it doesn't work 100% of the time, because one way or another, there's a candidate that comes from somebody from the higher management. And even if the balanced scorecard is in place, there are manipulations that are involved. And I think that's why Mr. Ivan wanted to ask this question, because it's human nature to choose who's more favorable towards somebody in the group or whatnot.
So, and I've experienced that. What I got is management to be part of the process and part of the designing the process. So they understand the underlying dynamics there, but still nothing's perfect, as you say, Samantha.
Yes, Mr. Patrick, and we have a comment on this matter from Miss Karen. She says, after screening for culture fit and skills, I then invite the rest of the team to interview the candidate and give an opinion.
Exactly.
I have not had any resignations for any reason other than health or personal reasons for 2 years using this method.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That proves your opinion. So.
Excellent.
Yes, I just wanted to add also exactly also how we did it at BCG, and not everything is perfect at BCG for sure, but our HR was completely decentralized. So we had a recruiting department for all consulting staff positions, because they all try to use similar standards for those positions. And then we had I was in charge, for example, for anybody who had a non-consulting position. So these were very diverse positions, right? And so what I always did is, so I was in charge of the hiring, not HR. Right, the recruiting department was in charge of hiring, not HR, and they included consultants of all, of all the different levels again. But so to participate in those interviews, and so did I. If I hired another, let's say, executive assistant, then I would invite other executive assistants to interview these candidates as well. Right. And we did have an HR department. We also had a centralized HR department in the corporate office, but they had very specific tasks. They were in charge of benefits, for example. They were in charge of preparing those packages. Yes, they were gladly, because I wouldn't want to do that. It's not my thing. And they were in charge of also, for example, determining the evaluation process, the appraisal process. Centrally. That didn't always exist in the beginning, but over time it was developed. So, I think it makes sense for certain tasks to be centralized, but others definitely make more sense. And the execution of these tasks makes more sense and creates better results if we decentralize those.
Good points.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you. So before we formally close today's session, are there any final notes from our panelists? Dr. Christine?
Thank you very much. This has really, really been insightful. I've also learned quite a lot and made people write on this forum. One of the things I think in just commenting on what has been raised in terms of of racism and nepotism. Somebody had commented that we will never get to a period in as humans in this world to a point where there will be no racism and there will be no nepotism, because as human beings, these things are always there. What we need to do is to make effort. And one of the things I think is what has already been discussed. This is co-creating. This is where we are appreciating the differences in us. This is where we are not looking, for instance, like in our case in Zambia, where the name, the surname you have tells where you are coming from. And it's very easy to say, no. If this person is named, his surname is this, then we know he's coming from this province. We don't want any people from this province to be part and parcel of this organization. It's about looking past those surnames and looking at the capabilities that that person is able to have. And it's the same situation even with the issues of competition, because we begin competing with one another, thinking that by competing, then we are going to be looked upon as much better. So I think we need to embrace this co-creating philosophy that has come about right here, where we begin to appreciate the differences that are among us, because then we are able to see potentials or potentialities in each and every individual that brings about a creativity, that brings about innovation. If the only kind of flower we had in the world was a red rose, I think that was going to be a very dull world. But you see, we've got different colors of roses, which means that the different colors of those roses add to the beauty of the rose flower. And that is the kind of a situation that we are in as human beings. Let's look past these small things that bring divisions and distract us from working and bring about deaths and all that among people. I think it's better that we look past them and embrace this whole element of co-creation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christine. Mr. Patrick?
Two things. One, I want to go back to the grandfather of OD, Kurt Lewin. Performance and culture and everything and relationships is based on two things, the individual / group plus the environment. So organizational forms have a major role in manifesting certain things. They can be positive of what we want to create or inhibit what we want to create. So we need to deal with both of those elements, both people and the forms of organizations we have, because they join together. And that's been one of the foundations of OD since the 1940s, and it'll always be a foundation of OD. The second point, what we see is what we create. Just a good saying of mine for about 35 years. If we shift our mindsets, we shift what we create. Simple thing, a little hard to do at times, takes time, but it's powerful.
Thank you so
That's
much,
it.
Mr. Patrick.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. Ms. Regina?
Yes, so I want to thank you all for this co-creational session. Everybody has been contributing their wisdom and their perspectives, the panelists and also the other participants, which made it such a rich discussion. Yeah, as an African proverb says, alone we go fast, together we go far. And I also want to point out that we all can make a difference to humanize the workplace, however small it might seem, yes, in our very own way. And I hope you discovered some pointers in these two sessions on this topic. Always remember, if you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. Another Africa has the best proverbs, really, always. And I know firsthand because I have had dengue fever and malaria, so I can attest to it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Regina. Dr. Justin?
Thank you so much. I see Stella is here. Stella, if you can close for us. Stella Manza. You can unmute yourself, Stella. Yes, you're muted again. Yes, there you are.
Afternoon.
Yes, Stella, go ahead.
I just want to say that it was a very good presentation. Learned a lot in terms of how you can also play the role the opposite way in terms of how an employee can also try to sort of dehumanize, the manager, their supervisors, to sort of have control of the situation, because sometimes even they're not able to take what you're capable of. I've also learned that there are certain skills that we may have, like we look after children who are so patient. So sometimes employers need to tap that and ensure that they can capitalize on the strengths of the employee, not necessarily based on their qualifications, but in terms of their abilities to be successful. So it's been very enlightening. I just also want to just make mention, I don't have a slide with me right now. We're UNICAF University. We are partners with COLD, and UNICAF is one of an online university. We've been in this business in Zambia for close to 3 years now. And with COVID now, I think most of the developing countries are sort of transitioning to online businesses. So for those of you that are interested, please do feel free. You can visit our websites. We are able to speak to you. We offer degree programs as well as bachelor's, bachelor, master's, PhDs, and we give scholarships. All our programs are scholarship based. So feel free to get in touch, and we'll have a student advisor get in touch with you. This has been very exciting, and I'm so looking forward to the next session. Hopefully we can bring a lot of our students on board so that they can learn more about what you're doing. Of course, this program is something that we do every month. Invite your friends. I know today we had a number, I think we reached almost 30. So you are here, you are 30 of you, invite a friend, they can invite a friend, because this is something where we're all learning. Look at the experts that we have there from a global platform. So we can easily talk to somebody in America at the same time. It's been a very, very wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stella. And with that, everyone, thank you. We've come to the end of our 5th session in the Reframing Corporate Perspective series about humanizing the workplace. Ms. Regina, Mr. Patrick, and of course, Dr. Christine, we are also grateful. We're always grateful for your continued participation in these sessions. And I'm sure the audience would agree that the knowledge and understanding gained during these sessions are unparalleled. I, of course, would also like to offer our appreciation to all the viewers, both in this Zoom classroom for your participation, or if you are watching on our FB Live, thank you for keeping up with us. We hope to have you with us in all our upcoming events. This is Samantha Nadine Abuda Salas, wishing everyone a very good day ahead. Please stay safe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Till next time.
People want to stay on, it seems. They must have enjoyed it.